call.
When I was out earlier today, I noticed that the only planes in the air were military aircraft. What is the military doing in this country and around the world?
Well, the military has put itself on what they call Force Protection Condition Delta. And what you need to know is that that is the highest state of alert that they have. They've changed the alert system they used to have during the Cold War. And U.S. military forces around the world are on their highest state of alert and prepared, we presume, to act. Although, of course, the first question is, if you're going to strike back, what do you do? In the meantime, 2 American aircraft carriers have shoved off from Norfolk today. They've headed up the East Coast simply to be in position to assist in any way that they can, providing helicopters or other transport, hospital facilities, anything else, with the damage here in Washington and also up the coast in New York City.
Thanks very much, Steve Inskeep.
Happy to help.
NPR's Steve Inskeep will be back in a moment with more special coverage of today's attacks on New York and Washington, D.C. This is NPR.
And you're listening to membership-supported KUAZ Tucson 1550 AM and KUAZ FM Tucson 89.1.
This is special coverage from NPR News on today's terrorist attacks. I'm Linda Wertheimer.
And I'm Noah Adams. In a time of national crisis, we are used to turning to the federal agencies in Washington for regular updates and news conferences. That has not happened today. The only federal official we've seen, except for brief remarks by the president, was his assistant, Karen Hughes. She spoke this afternoon at the FBI to assure the country the president is working on the issue.
He is in continuous communication with the Vice President and key members of his cabinet and national security team. Vice President Cheney and our National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, are in a secure facility at the White House. I have just come from there. The Secretary of Transportation and other members of our White House senior staff are gathered at a command center there, and we are coordinating with other branches of our federal government.
Bush aide Karen Hughes speaking earlier today. We're joined now by NPR's Barbara Bradley. Barbara, you've been at the FBI. What's going on in official Washington right now?
Well, as far as the FBI is concerned, we don't know a whole lot about what's going on. I've been standing outside of the FBI building since the first thing in the morning. The only official statement that they would give us is that, first, they have dispatched investigative teams to all the disaster sites. Second, that their first priority is to help the wounded. And finally, that they're working with other government agencies. So it's not been a whole lot of communication.
So when you don't have things being given to you by people in government, what do you do? How do you find out what's happening?
You know, you make phone calls when the cell phone is working, which today didn't work a whole lot. Today I spoke to a longtime FBI profiler, Clint Van Zandt, who's an expert on terrorism and specifically has been watching a major suspect, Osama bin Laden. And Van Zandt said that the U.S. did have some early warning signs. For example, someone from his organization wrote a British newspaper last week and threatened an attack on the U.S. And there was an earlier warning about 3 weeks ago. And at least Van Zandt said that he was not surprised about the timing since, as you know, one of bin Laden's top lieutenants was about to be sentenced tomorrow in New York City for his role in the bombings of the 2 U.S. embassies in Africa.
So with the warnings that apparently were out there, why could this attack not have been predicted?
You know, we get dozens of warnings every week, sometimes every day, and it's really nearly impossible to know which ones are legitimate or not. Experts say it takes a long time to get the infrastructure for this kind of strike in place. I mean, you have to train the pilots, you have to do the logistics, the planning, you have to raise some money. But once that plan is set up, the strike can happen at any time, and they can just choose to wait until a significant date. And that may be what's happened this time.
Now, tell us, is anything known about any of the victims in any of the deaths at the Trade Center or the other airline crashes today?
I don't believe we know we don't know the specific number of victims yet. We don't even know that. We do know the identity of one victim. She was Barbara Olson, who's a very influential Republican activist and is also the wife of the Solicitor General, Theodore Olson. She was on the American Airlines plane that crashed into the Pentagon, and apparently she was able to call her husband and say that the plane was being hijacked and that all the passengers had been moved to the back of the plane. And then, of course, the plane crashed into the Pentagon. It's kind of a chilling scene to think of.
There's Barbara Bradley.
The federal government sent workers today, shortly after the American Airlines plane crashed into the Pentagon. Federal workers poured out of buildings in downtown Washington, creating a citywide traffic jam as they tried to make their way home, adding to difficulties for ambulances and fire trucks trying to reach the Potomac River bridges on the way to the destruction at the Pentagon. Patricia Rivera of Denver and Phil Gentry of Portland, Oregon were in the city for a meeting at the Small Business Administration. Their meeting was canceled for now, and they were walking toward the bridges.
First time in my life, I saw cops with guns, and I'm in the street, M16s, and I've never seen that.
You have to treat this almost as a war zone, and the safe thing is not to be where there's visible buildings that might be of interest to terrorists, or on a subway would be one of those. So we're walking and trying to stay away from the main federal buildings.
Near the arena where Washington's basketball teams play, we ran into Erica Thornburg, who, along with some colleagues from the Veterans Administration, decided to go to lunch.
The streets are blocked, people aren't moving, the police are trying to direct traffic. Most of us don't have enough gas to get home if we're going to be sitting in traffic like this for 3 hours.